Thank God for fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is called Redemption Rehab. And today, we're talking about the rookie wide receivers coming into the NFL draft this April that are going to impact fantasy football for years to come. We're going to show you their highlights. We're going to show you their statistics. We're even going to tell you where they're going to go in your upcoming fantasy football drafts later this year. So buckle up, get out your popcorn, and let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are on a website called drafttech.com. They're going to rank the wide receivers in the order they think they will be taken in this year's NFL draft later this month, April 25th, 2024. Starting with this guy, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's out of Ohio State. He's 6'3", 209 pounds. He's a junior. Over here, he's the number 2 overall ranking by Draft Tech as the second best player in this draft, only behind quarterback Caleb Williams. And Draft Tech has him ranked as the number 1 wide receiver in this draft. So let's head over to the chalkboard and let's check out some of his stats and highlights. Okay, here we are at another go-to website that I like to use. It's called sportsreference.com. When you get a chance, you gotta check him out. And you can see here he played 3 years at Ohio State in the Big Ten Conference. He's 6'3", 209 pounds. He's ranked 2nd overall on Draft Tech as the second best player in this draft. Why? Because he was the 2023 Biletnikoff Award-winning as college best wide receiver. He was a unanimous All-American for Ohio State in back-to-back seasons. In 2023, he was also a Heisman Trophy finalist, and he was Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, first team All-Big Ten. In his 38 games at Ohio State, he managed to catch 155 receptions for 2,613 yards, a 16.9 average per catch. He had 31 touchdowns. He rushed the ball 4 times for 58 yards with another touchdown. He doesn't return kickoffs and he doesn't return punts. He didn't go to this year's NFL Combine, so we're assuming that his height, weight, and 40 time are all good. This kid's one of the best players in this draft. If you get a chance to get Marvin Harrison Jr., you better go out and pick him up. Who else do we like? Let's head back to the chalkboard and check out who's next. Well, as you can see here, we're back looking at some of the rankings on Draft Tech. Next guy on the board is another magnificent wide receiver coming into this year's NFL draft later this month in April, and it's Malik Nabers from LSU, 6', 200-pound junior. Draft Tech has him ranked as the 7th overall best player, and he's the 2nd best wide receiver ranked in this draft according to Draft Tech. Like I said, 6', 200-pound junior. As you can see here on sportsreference.com, Malik Nabers played 3 years at LSU, where he was a consensus All-American in 2023. He was a Biletnikoff Award finalist. He's a first-team All-SEC wide receiver. In his 38 games he played at LSU, he caught 189 receptions for 3,003 yards for a 15.9 average per catch. He managed to score 21 TDs, and he did run the ball for 29 yards with no touchdown. He didn't run it to combine, so we don't know how fast he is, but I can assure you he's very fast. He doesn't return punts, but he did manage to return 2 kickoffs last year, 31 yards for a 15.5 yard average per kickoff return. Some of these wide receivers do return punts and kickoffs. It's very important because it determines their draft stock. Let's head back to the chalkboard and see who else we like. Okay, here we are checking out the chalkboard again, and the next wide receiver that Draft Tech has on their board is this guy here, and he's another really good receiver. These top three guys are going to go in all your Dynasty League drafts, probably 1, 2, 3, except for your 2 quarterback leagues. Odunze out of Washington, 6'3", 212 pounds. He's a redshirt junior. Draft Tech has him ranked as their 8th overall best player in this draft. Let's check out some of his stats. Okay, as you can see here on sportsreference.com, Odunze played 4 years at Washington in the Pac-12. He was an academic All-American. This means he's pretty smart. He was an All-American with many of the media websites in 2023. He was a Pac-12 first-team All-American. He was the Blitnikoff semifinalist, like some of the other receivers we talk about today. In his 40 games at Washington, he had 214 receptions for 3,272 yards for a 15.3-yard average per catch. He managed to take in 24 touchdowns. He ran the ball 10 times for 40 yards and another 2 touchdowns. He had limited punt return skills. 3 times he returned punts for 87 yards, and he ran a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. These first 3 guys are the 3 wide receivers you want in your Dynasty Leagues, first 3 picks, and in your redraft leagues. They're probably going to go in the top 5 rounds of every draft you're in. Why? Because they're that good. This is a wide receiver draft. Speaking of drafts, let's head over and see where they're going in some of your mock drafts in early April. Okay, here we are on another one of our affiliates. It's called fantasypros.com. When you get a chance, check them out. Go to the description that we have. You can do a mock draft just by hitting the link we put in there. As you can see here, Marvin Harrison's first wide receiver off the board, followed by Malik Nabers and Odunze. Wide receivers are getting taken a lot in these mock drafts. Why? Because wide receivers are deep. You can expect 16, 17, 18 of these wide receivers to be taken in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft in April. Who else is getting taken? Notice Brock Bowers, best tight end. We did a show on tight ends that'll impact fantasy football. When you get a chance, check it out. And you can see some of these other receivers we're going to talk about. McConkey, Brian Thomas, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, all going to be taken in probably the first rounds of your Dynasty League drafts, and they're all going to go in your redraft leagues. Let's head over to the chalkboard and see where some of these guys' stats and statistics look like from their career in college. Okay, the next best wide receiver, according to Draft Tech, and I like this kid a lot too, is Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. Look at the size on this guy, 6'3", 209 pounds. He's a junior. He was the 24th ranked overall best player in this year's NFL draft, according to Draft Tech. Draft Tech has him ranked as the 4th best wide receiver. Let's check out some of his highlights. Brian Thomas Jr. played 38 games while at LSU. He had 127 receptions for 1,897 yards for a 14.9-yard average per catch, and he scored 24 touchdowns. He had no rushes, no punt returns, and no kickoff returns. He ran at 4.3440, and he had 17 TDs, which led all wide receivers in touchdown in 2023. In his career, he managed to score 24 touchdowns. I really like this kid. He's probably going to go in the first round in the NFL draft. We'll see where he goes. That depends on where he goes in all your redraft leagues. I expect him to go in the first round of all your dynasty leagues. We got a lot of receivers we got to look at, so we got to keep barreling through this as fast as we can to keep this video as short as possible. If you get a chance, make sure you hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. We appreciate the support. Another guy we really like is this guy here, Troy Franklin. Man, this kid lit it up at Oregon. He's not very big. He's tall, 6'2", but he only weighs 176 pounds. But he's fast. At the NFL Combine, he managed to pull off a 4.4. So these are really, really fast wide receivers. Draft Tech has this guy ranked as the 30th best overall player in this draft. He may go in the first round of the NFL draft. Then he might slide to the beginning of the second round in the NFL draft. And if someone gets him early in that second round, they got themselves a really good speed burner. He can catch the ball deep. What did he do in his career? Well, in his 40 games at Oregon, as you can see here on sportsreference.com, Troy Franklin had 160 receptions for 2,483 yards. He had a 15.5 average per catch and a whopping 25 touchdowns. He managed to play in 40 games, and he did not run the ball at all. He didn't return any punts, and he didn't return any kickoffs. He managed to run a 4.40 and the 40-yard dash. I'll tell you what, he's a fast guy. The 176 pounds, that's concerning. But look, there's a lot of receivers in the NFL that don't weigh 200 and some pounds. But this kid's fast, and he can catch the ball. He's going to light it up this year. If you get a chance in your redraft leagues or your dynasty leagues to get this guy, you should pull the trigger. Who else do we like? Let's head back to the chalkboard and check it out. Okay, the next guy on the list here is McConkey over in Georgia. This kid has some good playing time down there in Georgia. He lit it up. He's a football player. He's very hard to tackle, and he's very good in the open field, and he can catch the ball, but even better, he can run the ball. What's so great about this guy being 6 foot, 186 pounds? Draft Tech has him ranked as the 31st overall best player. Well, let's head over and check out some of his stats. Okay, here's another guy we got to check out his stats on. Most people don't know about him, but I'll tell you what, he's a good player, and he's a good player for Georgia. In his 39 games at Georgia, he played 4 years. Basically didn't play his first year, but over a 3-year period, he had 119 receptions, 1,687 yards for a 14.2-yard average per catch, but he only had 14 touchdowns. What makes sets him apart is the fact that he ran the ball 13 times for 216 yards. He had a 16.6-yard average and 4 touchdowns as a wide receiver. He also returns punts. He returns 21 punts for 279 yards and 13.3-yard average per punt return. Look, this NFL draft, it really depends on where this guy goes to a quarterback that's accurate. If they want somebody that can ball control, get him to a quarterback who will really help move the sticks. This is your guy. I really like him. Depends on where he's drafted in the NFL draft. Depends on where we'll take him in your redraft leagues. He's a solid first-round pick in all your dynasty leagues. Let's head back to the chalkboard and look at some other wide receivers. Another really good player in college last year was this kid, Adonai Mitchell, down there at Texas. 6'3", 190-pound junior. Draft Tech has him ranked 32nd overall. He's their 7th best wide receiver. Let's check out some of his highlights. Okay, these are the stats and some of the highlights of Adonai Mitchell. As you can see here, he had, in his 35 games in college, he had 93 receptions for 1,405 yards. He had 15-yard average per catch, and he managed to catch 18 touchdowns. He doesn't run the ball, even though he had 1 in his career for no yards. He doesn't return punts, and he doesn't return kickoffs, but he can run fast. He ran a 4.35 at the NFL Combine in the 40-yard dash. Look, this kid's an untapped talent. Probably has to work on his route running skills, catching the ball, and holding on to the ball. Strength is a big deal for this guy. He needs to grow into that body because he's a big kid and he's fast. So we need to find out where this kid's going in the NFL draft later this month. We'll see where he goes in your redraft leagues because of that. But I'm pretty sure he's going to go in the first round of all your dynasty league drafts. But I'd be careful with this guy. There's some risk here. He just didn't do a lot in his career to deserve to be a high draft choice in the NFL. But he's got talent. Let's head back to the chalkboard and see who else we like. Okay, the last wide receiver on this list before we move on to another list of wide receivers, there's a lot. We got to get to them. Is this guy down here, Xavier Worthy out of Texas, 6'1", only 164-pound junior. He's the 39th ranked overall player in this year's draft, according to Draft Check. Let's take a look at some of his highlights. Okay, I'll tell you what's special about this kid is he's super fast. He set a new NFL record at the Combine for a 4.22 in the 40-yard dash, and he has the stats to back it up. I wouldn't consider him a John Ross who used to have the record, because this kid produced every year in college, as you can see here, playing 3 years at Texas, where he managed 197 receptions for 2,755 yards. He had a 14-yard average per catch, and he had 26 TDs. That's not all he does. He had 7 rushes for 56 yards. He returns punts. He had 40 punt returns for a whopping 564 yards, a 14.1 yard average per punt return, and he managed to take one to the house for a touchdown. He also returns kickoffs. He returned 2 for 33 yards for a 16.5 yard average. Look, the fact that this kid's an all-around player, can run the ball, return punts, kickoffs, and he's the fastest guy on the field means he might sneak into the first round of this year's NFL draft. When he put up that 4.22 and the 40-yard dash to the NFL Combine, everybody, including the coaches, got up and gave this kid a standing ovation. Let's head over and see where some of these guys are going in your Dynasty League drafts. Okay, here we are looking at the mock draft we did earlier today before we got into this episode. And you can see here the 4th wide receiver off the board, Lad McConkey out of Georgia. Then Brian Thomas. We talked about those two. We talked about Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy. Then you get into your quarterbacks. We did video of quarterbacks that will impact fantasy football in this year's NFL draft. And we talked about Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. All of these guys are going to do good. You need to watch those other videos if you get a chance. And you can see right here, the next round, there's your Adonai Mitchell, your Keon Coleman. We talked about these guys. Why? Because they're going to get drafted early and often in all your dynasty leagues and all your redraft leagues later this year. Guys we got coming up, we're going to be talking about Keon Coleman, Roman Wilson, Xavier Legette. We'll touch on some of these other guys, as you can see here. There's a lot of wide receivers to talk about, so let's get back to the chalkboard and check out the facts. Okay, the next best player, according to Draft Tech on the board, is the guy we just mentioned, Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Look at that, 6'3", 213-pound junior. This kid can ball, man. Check out his highlights. Okay, here you are back on Sports Reference. We're looking at Keon Coleman. As you can see here, he played 3 years in college, 2 at Michigan State and 1 at Florida State. He had 115 receptions for 1,506 yards. He had a 13.1 yard average per catch, and he only scored 19 touchdowns in 3 years. He did manage 25 punt returns, though, for 300 yards and a 12-yard average per punt return. His 40-yard dash was a 4.6 at the NFL Combine. This guy's got a lot of question marks, too. A lot of people are taking him, NFL draft, that early second round kind of thing. In your dynasty leagues, he could go in that second round. In your redraft leagues, people are going to be taking this kid, too, depending upon who takes him in the NFL draft later this month. Keep an eye on Keon Coleman. When he fills that body out, this kid could be tough, real tough. Let's head back to the chalkboard and take a look at some of these other receivers. Okay, here's another fine receiver out there at Michigan that won a national championship with Roman Wilson at Michigan, 5'11", 185-pound senior, so he's been around. He's kind of small. Draft Tech has him ranked as the 42nd overall player, moving up 5 spots from a week ago. Let's check out some of his stats and highlights. Okay, here we are looking at Roman Wilson. Played 4 years at Michigan. He had 107 receptions for 1,707 yards for a 16 average per catch and 20 touchdowns. He managed to run the ball 7 times for 117 yards, a 16.7 yard average per attempt, and another 2 touchdowns. He doesn't return punts, but he did manage to return 6 kickoffs for 134 yards and a 22.3 yard average per return, and he had a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. This kid's a really good football player, multi-dimensional. That's why they're going to take him in the second round of the NFL draft. I'm not sure about his fantasy value yet. We'll just have to see how he performs. He is going in a lot of dynasty leagues in that second round, and he is going, as we'll show you in a little bit, he's going in your redraft leagues. So you got to pay attention and know who Roman Wilson is. Let's head back to the chalkboard and look at a handful of more wide receivers. Okay, here's another really good wide receiver. I mean, like I said, I was dragging on, but I'll tell you what, Xavier Legette of South Carolina. They say he's 6'3", but probably not. 227-pound senior, so he's been around for a while. Draft Tech has him moving up 15 spots in the last week. Why? Because he produced at his pro day. And this kid's a playmaker. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. Let's take a look at some of his stats. Okay, here's some of the stats from Xavier Legette. He played in 53 games, so he's one of the older players in the draft. His statistics aren't as high as I thought they'd be, but he's a very, very good player. He had 113 receptions for 1,678 yards. That's a 14.8 yard average per catch. He only scored in 5 years 12 touchdowns. He did manage to rush the ball 16 times, but he didn't do that very well either. It was only for 12 yards. That's a 0.8 yard average per rush. That's less than a yard. He doesn't really return punts, but he did manage 29 kickoff returns for 767 yards. It's a 26-yard average, 1 touchdown. He managed to pull off a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. I mean, this kid looks strong in these highlights. He looks like a real player, but I'd want to know who takes him in the NFL draft. He's rising up draft boards because he's a playmaker. So I expect him to do well in the NFL. Keep an eye on where he goes in this year's NFL draft. Now we're going to go some rapid fire to get through some of these other wide receivers because we want to try to keep these videos as short as possible. Let's head back to the chalkboard and check out some of these guys' stats and highlights. Okay, here's another really good wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall, 6'1", 190-pound senior. He played 5 years, 3 years at Arizona State, and then transferred to Florida where he played another 2 years. He managed to play 45 games over that 5-year period, and he managed to catch 159 receptions for 2,420 yards. That's a 15.2 yard average per catch. He only managed to score 14 touchdowns. He does run the ball. He managed to run the ball 21 times for 253 yards. That's a 12-yard average with another 5 TDs. He also returns punts. He had 15 punt returns for 153 yards and a 10-yard average, and he managed 1 kickoff return for 28 yards, and his 40-yard dash time is 4.4. That's perfect for a wide receiver heading into the NFL draft. Another guy I really like a lot, and you're going to hear about him a lot, especially going into the draft and afterwards, is Malachi Corley. He's 5'11", 210-pound junior. He played 4 years at Western Kentucky. In his 49 games there, he had a whopping 259 receptions for 3,035 yards and 29 touchdowns. He did run the ball 16 times for 92 yards. He doesn't return punts or kickoffs, but this kid is an open field nightmare, and when he gets the ball in his hands, he used to be a running back. He'll just run you over. I really like Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. Another guy we have to keep an eye on is out of Alabama, Jermaine Burton. He's 6 foot, 194 pounds, senior. He played 4 years, 2 years at Georgia, 2 years at Alabama. In his 50 games, he managed only 132 receptions for 2,376 yards and 23 touchdowns. He ran the ball 4 times for 50 yards, and he doesn't return punts or kickoffs. But he played a tough schedule at Alabama, and he was a main cog in the wheel for them in 2022 and 2023. A guy we got to tell you about that might do something here is Luke McCaffrey, 6'2", 195-pound redshirt junior. Played 5 years. He played 3 years quarterback at Nebraska, where he was a dual threat running and throwing quarterback, and managed to transfer down to Rice, where he played another 2 years. And he managed to catch 131 receptions, for 1,732 yards and 19 touchdowns. Oh, I want to make sure you know that his brother is Christian McCaffrey from the San Francisco 49ers, and his dad was Ed McCaffrey, who played for the Denver Broncos.
Okay, here's a mock draft we did in a redraft league. It's a 12-team, one quarterback league. And as you can see here, the first rookie to go off the board is right here in round 3, and it's Marvin Harrison Jr. Another rookie doesn't go off the board till you get down here in round 5. Second wide receiver off the board is, like we told you, Malik Nabers. Then 2 picks later, Odunze. If you go down here all the way to round 9, you won't see any rookies going after those 3. You won't see a rookie quarterback. You won't see a rookie tight end. You won't see any more rookie wide receivers. They're not going till the second half of drafts in redraft leagues. Let's check out and see where they're going. Okay, here we are looking at the second half of this mock draft for this redraft league. And the first rookie that went off the board in the second half to draft is a rookie running back, as you can see here, was Trey Benson, then Blake Corum. Other notable rookies is down here, Brock Bowers goes in round 12. And you get your 2 quarterbacks that go down here in rounds 14, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Where did our wide receivers go? Well, how about up here? Keon Coleman was the first wide receiver to go off after the big 3. And then the next wide receiver to go off, how about Adonai Mitchell down here in round 12? And then you don't get another wide receiver that's a rookie go off until you get down here in round 15, where Brian Thomas goes and Troy Franklin. We'll mark some of these other receivers so you can see who else you should be keeping an eye on. Some of the other rookie wide receivers that'll impact fantasy football in 2024 in your redraft leagues, so you have an idea of who to look out for.
Wow, that's a lot. Man, I'm tired. I'm out of breath. But I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of wide receivers in this draft. We had to get through them all. We tried to make it as short as possible. And I'll tell you what, if you get a chance, make sure you subscribe or give us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. That's it for our wide receiver show. When you get a chance, check out some of our other impact shows at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm Buster Brown. The show is called Redemption Rehab. Good luck.